Hi everyone, and welcome to ShoeCap's Building Resiliency series. My name is Dr. Julie DiMatteo and I am a staff psychologist at CAPS. For those of you that are not familiar with our department, CAPS, or Counseling and Psychological Services, provides free year-round counseling, crisis intervention, consultation, and referral services to the SHU community. Our mission is to foster the psychological health and well-being of our students in order to enable them to thrive, develop, and achieve academic success. I encourage you to check out our website, www.shu.edu/caps, for more information and helpful resources. This is the second video in our three-part video series discussing the concept of resiliency. Aligned with the goal of our first video to teach you skills how to thrive, not just survive, when major stressors arrive in college, the goal of this second video is to teach you ways to build healthy relationships that foster resiliency and provide us support in times of adversity. In our first video, we defined resiliency, why it is critical to success in college, and the skills needed to build and maintain resiliency. In this video, we are going to highlight ways to connect with others and reduce loneliness. At the end of this video, we will also provide resources should you want additional information, as well as how to contact CAPS if you feel that additional support is needed. I look forward to presenting this information to you and hope it provides meaningful skills to support you in feeling connected to others and our campus community. We know college students, especially in their first year, report high levels of loneliness given the major shifts in their social support networks. Often, this loneliness can prompt other difficulties such as depression and anxiety and can decrease the likelihood of a resilient outcome when we hit obstacles in our academic path. In contrast, having a network of healthy attachments and supports increases the likelihood of resiliency as it creates greater meaning in our life. As we know, the transition to college can be difficult. In this video, we will define the scope of loneliness in young adults as well as define what healthy relationships look like. We hope that you'll be able to understand the role of these relationships in building resiliency, while also learning strategies to reduce loneliness and increase supports on campus. What does loneliness look like among college students? Interestingly, the highest average rates of loneliness occur between ages 18 to 22. In fact, approximately 64% of college students report feeling very lonely within the last year. Some reasons for this include the transition to adulthood. As students transition to college, the type of social support changes compared to high school. There is less structure and routine and less monitoring compared to high school. Participation in organized sports, clubs, and events decreases, and students are on different schedules, making it difficult to find time to connect to others. Additionally, many students leave home for the first time, decreasing parental and familial support. Increased social media use is found to contribute to increased loneliness as well in two major ways. First, it decreases face-to-face contact. Interestingly, when we look at the rates of loneliness, we find that loneliness decreases when face-to-face interaction increases. The more time spent off our phones and interacting with people in person, the better we feel. More information about the importance of talking, not texting, and the role of our smartphones in contributing to this loneliness can be found in our What's Up Doc Talking Not Texting video, found on the CAPS website. Second, social media use leads to viewing what has been called a highly idealized representation of the lives of those around us. This means that we often compare our life to have greater hardship and greater social isolation when we view social media. However, research shows us that is often not supported, but rather the perception we get because of the brief images and interpretations we make as we view this content. Increased diversity on campus highlights the disparity between the experience of white students and students of color on college campuses. When we break loneliness statistics down, we find that students of color experience greater social isolation and loneliness compared to white students. Some reasons for this include negative stereotypes and greater exclusion of people of color in the campus community, a lack of racial and cultural representation across faculty members, leading to a lack of role models for people of color, and greater feelings of imposter syndrome, or a sense that I don't belong as a person of color. Additionally, first-generation college students experience similar gaps in loneliness, which has been attributed to the difficulties navigating campus and academic life and connecting to others on campus. Finally, stigma, especially in people of color, surrounding mental health treatment contributes to loneliness, as individuals are less likely to seek support. In fact, 50% of college students expressed concern that others would think less of them if they sought mental health treatment. In turn, not seeking support for this loneliness can prompt greater mental health difficulties such as depression and anxiety. In addition to contributing to greater mental health difficulties, loneliness is also found to compromise the likelihood of having a resilient outcome when we face adversity. Loneliness is both a factor of and a precipitator to reduced social supports, meaning we do not always have the network to rely on to help us when we face an obstacle. Additionally, loneliness creates greater pessimism and negativity in our perception of others' intentions. This means that we are less likely to see others as being helpful and supportive, and more likely to see them as uninterested or uncaring when we are lonely. In turn, this means we are less likely to connect to others when we are feeling lonely, and to turn to supports to facilitate resiliency when we face an adverse situation. As a result, we are also more likely to be seen by others as demanding, withdrawn, and critical when we are lonely, because we perceive their intentions to be negative and we go into the interaction with lower expectations and greater defensiveness. Therefore, we may not present our best self to others when we're feeling lonely. Given all these factors associated with loneliness, let's now discuss some ways to counteract loneliness and start building supports. First, set time aside to talk to parents, friends, and other supports both on and off campus. Especially if this is your first time at the university, it is important to maintain connection to those who were prior supports. When you talk, try to connect by phone or video chat. Texting can decrease social support and actually increase loneliness and miscommunication that furthers our sense of isolation. Second, plan to meet in person with friends. As you make relationships, try to make plans to eat or attend an event together. Move the relationship out of texting and social media. Similarly, limit your social media use. Set a time limit each day and abide by that limit. Even better, try to limit how many platforms you are checking and how are you communicating with your friends. Rather than direct messaging through apps, try texting and phone calls to limit your use. Following content that increases loneliness and decreases our mood can also be detrimental. Follow positive content and users that make you feel good or inspire you. Practice gratitude. Social media can lead to unfair comparisons that make our lives seem more isolated and more disconnected than they may really be. Try each day to list all the things in your life that you're grateful for and that are going well. This can be simple things like having food and shelter, to things like talking to a new person, doing well in a class, having supportive family or friends, etc. And each day by making a list of what you are grateful for. We know that a gratitude list can actually undo the negative emotions we felt during the day and improve both our mood and our sense of social connection. Join clubs, organizations, and other structured activities such as exercise classes, volunteer organizations, or even a part-time job. All these activities decrease our isolation and also increase the likelihood of us connecting to individuals we can form a relationship with. This might not always be easy to do, and we'll talk more about ways to do so in a bit. Next, consider factors related to diversity and inclusion. For students of color, increased social support, cultural pride, and sense of belonging comes from interacting with others with a similar cultural background, and it has also been found to be beneficial to decreasing loneliness felt because of racial and cultural factors. There are additional resources highlighted at the end of this presentation on campus designed to assist students of color to adapt to the campus environment that can also make a positive difference in adjustment and emotional well-being. For white students, consider inclusion when you plan events and activities to both increase your own connection to individuals from diverse backgrounds as well as to provide a more inclusive environment. Check out the university's diversity and inclusion initiatives, and we'll discuss more of these on the campus resources page at the end of this video. Finally, be sure to diversify the types of supports you have. Supports do not only look like close friends and family. Supports can also be mentors, professors, classmates, spiritual leaders, role models in your community or your major, etc. Some supports provide us emotional well-being and some provide us information. This is all support. Most importantly, find opportunities to volunteer and contribute to your community. This is shown as one of the greatest ways to form meaningful social connections. Building relationships can be really challenging, especially in a new environment. We are going to discuss Cook et al.'s EMR model as a pathway to successfully building and maintaining relationships. In this model, Cook discusses how to establish relationships through positive interactions, how to maintain the relationship through support, and how to restore the relationship when conflict inevitably occurs. Before we delve into it, let's take a moment to reflect on the relationships you currently have and those that you would like to build. Reflect on what type of relationships you want. What relationships provide you meaning and make you feel connected? Similarly, what relationships do you need? As we discussed before, relationships vary in type of support. For instance, we may need a close friendship that provides us space to talk and get support, and we might also need an informative relationship with a professor, an advisor, or a mentor to help us gather the information needed to pursue our academic and career goals. How do you want to feel in these relationships? What makes you feel good in a relationship? In contrast, what makes you feel not so good or disconnected in a relationship? How do you want others to feel about you? How do you want to make others feel, and what impression do you want them to leave the interaction with? Finally, all these qualities and factors need to align with our goals and values. Thinking back to our first video, take a moment to pull out your list of important values and goals as they pertain to relationships. Determine what gaps you need to fill in relationships to align with these goals and values and to bring greater meaning to your life. With that information in mind, let's talk about how we establish relationships. As we discussed at the beginning of the video, it can be really hard to overcome the negative mindset associated with loneliness. If you remember, individuals with high loneliness are more dubious and less receptive to the efforts made by others. This means that you may actually miss opportunities for relationships. Here we are going to discuss how to establish relationships, and then on the next slide, some strategies to use if you're finding it hard getting yourself into situations that increase your opportunities to meet people. First, we need to spend time with people we want to be closer to. Thinking back to your self-reflection, what types of connections and relationships do you want and need? Identify this first so you can be more intentional in your interactions. It can be exhausting and discouraging if we keep trying to establish relationships but don't feel connected. We need to be intentional to increase the likelihood of a successful outcome. Therefore, we need to look for people who are shared not only similar interests and hobbies, but also those who have similar attitudes as us. When first establishing a relationship, it's important to engage in fun activities together. Just as we discussed pleasant activities as providing a buffer against negative emotions, engaging in pleasant activities at the beginning provides a pathway to developing a more meaningful, stable relationship. We also need to be sure to demonstrate interest. We do so by putting our phones down and maintaining eye contact when the other is speaking. We want to ask open-ended questions and to validate the other person is saying by expressing understanding. We can do this by summarizing and repeating back what they said, or reading between the lines and showing that we understand how they feel. Similarly, we can do this by remembering what others told you, such as facts about where they live or what they like to do, or giving a compliment. All of this helps to build connection. We need to reciprocate in the conversation as well. We do this through making small talk, making small self-disclosures, and by not interrupting. As we said before, relationships are a two-way street, so we want to make sure we are appropriately sharing and also giving space for the other person to share. Sharing can be difficult as we don't want to overshare at the beginning, but also don't want to appear too closed off that others lose interest. To do this, we need to be vulnerable, which can be tough. Sometimes this is trial and error as we learn what the appropriate amount is for the relationship and ourselves. However, this is best achieved if we are our authentic self in relationships. Not everyone will be a fit for us, and we won't be a fit for everyone. However, if we are our authentic self, we increase the likelihood of not only connecting with others, but finding meaningful connections in our lives. Now, if you're finding it challenging to get yourself out there, try to use these steps proposed by Cacioppo and Patrick. This model looks at ways to engage in new activities that could connect us to others by taking small steps towards our goals. We don't need to make giant leaps at first. We can work our way up to increasing our interactions. The first E is to extend yourself. Find a way to get out there. Identify what obstacles you are facing and decide what you can do to overcome them. For instance, if you are hesitant to go alone, see if your roommate or a friend can go with you. Or take a test run to walk over to where the event is so you have some familiarity on the day of. The A means to create an action plan. Know yourself and what works for you. Write out a plan and what it will look like on the day of. Where are you going? Who will be there? What are some talking points to initiate conversation? The most important thing you can do here is to write out and practice. Imagine yourself walking through these steps. Picture both obstacles you anticipate facing and how you would manage them, as well as imagining success. Next, select who you want as a friend. Be conscious of what you want in a friend and join activities that put you in proximity with these individuals. Remember, relationships are reciprocal, meaning they are a two-way street. Set yourself up for success by attending events and initiating relationships with people who seem to be similar to you, who share interests, and who you feel comfortable being around. And our last E is to expect the best. Be aware you might be anxious or uncomfortable. Try anyway. Sometimes it takes several times of hanging out with someone or attending a club or event to feel comfortable. Try a few times before you rule it out. As we discussed before, it is important to plan for success. Instead of focus on everything that can go wrong, focus on what things you can go well and what positive outcomes may come out of this interaction. As we discussed before, loneliness can increase our negative perception of others, meaning we may find it harder to connect. Additionally, when we are lonely, we so want to connect to others that sometimes we end up compromising our own values and goals to do so. Here, we review a list of qualities associated with healthy relationships and those associated with unhealthy relationships to provide us a framework for making sure our negative perceptions don't impact identifying what could be a meaningful relationship, and also to make sure that our want to connect to others doesn't jeopardize our own well-being. Qualities of healthy relationships include mutual respect, honesty, compromise, good communication, fighting fair, understanding, self-confidence, being a role model, and healthy sexual relationships. One thing to note is fighting fair. All relationships have disagreements. What distinguishes a healthy versus unhealthy relationship is what those disagreements look like. We'll talk more about this in a little bit. Qualities of unhealthy relationships include control, hostility, dishonesty, disrespect, dependence, intimidation, physical violence, and sexual violence. If you find that you are feeling unsafe or threatened in a current relationship, CAPS, health services, and members of the clergy are confidential resources on campus to confide in. A formal report can also be made through the Dean of Students' office or contacting your local law enforcement. Remember, it is the quality, not quantity of our relationships. We can have all the acquaintances in the world and still feel lonely, and we can have just one close friend and feel tremendous support and connection. The importance is how the relationship makes you feel. Also be mindful that sometimes social media can skew this, which means we focus so much on how many friends we have, we don't focus enough on how we feel, compromising both the meaning we get from the relationship and the buffer it provides when we face an adverse social situation. Next, we need to maintain relationships. Now, we really only need to do two things to maintain relationships. The first is that we have to have fun together. We use a general rule of thumb that we need 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction. These positive things do not need to be huge. They can be small things like texting to check in on someone, or something big like attending a fun event together. Now, not every relationship is rosy all the time, but generally, we want to enjoy being with that person. We want to be cautious of getting into relationships that are just about complaining, or that you only go to that person or they only come to you when something is wrong. Generally, these relationships don't feel good and they don't bring us great meaning because there's a lack of balance between positive and negative interactions. That's where this 5-to-1 ratio comes in, to help us maintain balance in our relationships. The second thing we need to do is provide support. That means that they provide you support and that you provide them support. Support from another person makes us feel validated and connected. And supporting another person not only does the same for that individual, but also makes us feel good that we were able to be helpful. The best way to do this is to listen and to validate the other individual. We express validation by being empathic. Even if we never experience the same situation as that individual, we can validate their feelings and show understanding that we hear how they feel. Going back to our strategies from before, we need to put our phones down and just listen and show that person we care. Now, last, we need to know how to restore relationships when inevitably disagreements occur. As we discussed before, in life, conflicts occur, and after it occurs, we want to make sure to reconnect and restore the relationship. This ability to restore is actually the most critical piece to our interpersonal success. First, we need to be able to reconnect to that person. Remember our 5-to-1 ratio. It is best to reconnect with the person through your usual means of communication. For instance, if you usually meet up in person, talk in person. Avoid avoiding. We talked about this in the first video, how avoiding might initially feel more comfortable because we can put off the discomfort we feel. But long term, it can make things worse. Don't put off reconnecting for too long or it can make it harder to do so. Next, we need to repair. Making repairs means apologizing and acknowledging your role in the conflict. Remember, this is if our goal is to keep this relationship. We need to be able to effectively hear the other person and to repair what we did in the conflict. Hearing the other person does not mean we need to necessarily agree or acquiesce or apologize for something we didn't do. Rather, it can be using that active listening we discussed to make sure the other person feels heard. If they feel heard, they're also going to be more likely to hear us. Repairing also does not mean, like I said, apologizing. It can look like asking for a redo or expressing care for the other individual. Finally, we work to restore the relationship over time. Some problems can be solved immediately and some take time to heal. We need to be able to give the other person space. Here, we also want to remember the difference between being effective and being right. Sometimes we get so fixated on being right that we further damage the relationship. Go back to your goal and decide, what do I need to do to help restore this relationship? Intentionality is important here. Sometimes it can be really hard in conflict to manage our emotions, be effective, and to think about the other person. A mindfulness of others exercise can be really good to help us achieve this goal. As I walk through this exercise, try to picture a relationship that has been hard to repair, or one that you'd like to get closer to. Not all these points work for each relationship, but can be helpful to think about. First, just observe the relationship and the other person. We do so by paying attention with interest and curiosity to others around us. Stop multitasking and just focus on the other person. Next, stay in the present rather than planning what to say next. Let go of a focus on yourself and focus on that other person. Be open to hearing and accepting new information, even if it goes against what you thought you already knew. Give up clinging to being right and focus on what your larger goal is for the relationship. Finally, notice judgmental thoughts about the other person that may be arising and try to let them go. Instead, describe the relationship and the situation in a neutral, fact-based way. We do so by replacing judgmental descriptions with neutral ones. Try to use lawyer mind here. Stick to the facts you know and avoid assuming or interpreting what other people are thinking. Remember, we can't observe another person's thoughts, motives, intentions, or desires. If we do so, we are mind reading, and that can take us further away from restoring the relationship. We need to avoid questioning motives and give others the benefit of the doubt. Remember, these are the skills we're using when we want to keep this relationship. Finally, we want to participate with our full attention by throwing ourselves into the interaction and going with the flow rather than trying to control the flow. Space may be key here to let the person also process what they're feeling about the conflict. Here is a list of campus resources, organizations, and the events calendar that can help you plan out opportunities to connect to others and our campus community. This list is not exhaustive, so I encourage you to browse the Student Life section on the SHU website for even more opportunities. SHU has over 150 student organizations to join, so be sure to check out the list. I also encourage you to check out our CAPS webpage for additional resources such as group therapy that might be helpful to teaching skills to make friends and additional resources for people of color feeling disconnected or isolated from their community and the SHU campus. Review the list of campus clubs, resources, and the events calendar. Pick one event each week to attend, be either a sports game, a club meeting, or any other social event. Just give it a try. Pause for a moment and think, what interests you about this event and what are you looking forward to? What obstacles may get in the way of attending? Don't forget to ease your way into it and plan ahead for how you can minimize these obstacles from getting in the way of connecting. If you find you are in need of additional support or resources, please call CAPS at 973-761-9500. Our standard office hours are Monday through Friday, 8:45 a.m. to 4:45 p.m. In the case of a psychological emergency after hours or on weekends, an on-call counselor can be reached by calling our main number 973-761-9500. Finally, this is a list of the research that underlies the information presented to you today. Consider checking out these articles and books if you are interested in additional readings on resiliency and loneliness.